Hello, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie. Today I'm going to do a video about some of the books I would recommend for like to read during Women in Translation Month, but also at any point during the year. I'm not at my best at the moment, so I think this will be kind of briefer than normal and hopefully it will make sense. I will have talked about like all of these books I think somewhere on my channel at some point. So I don't think any of this will necessarily be particularly like new, but it's sort of following on from the video I made looking at all of my books on my physical shelves that are translated and by women. So yeah, and I said maybe I would make a video like this. You get it, hopefully. We'll move on. I do think like one thing to say is like obviously, I mean, I think having like a month focused to reading books in translation is really good. But I also think that like there is a way that this kind of recenters like Anglophone readers or like monolingual English readers, because obviously lots of people are reading books in translation almost all the time. It's just more of a novelty for those of us who speak like most dominant languages. But I hope you understand what I mean in the sense of kind of like, I think as a project, this is supposed to like demarginalize translated fiction from one language into English, but at the same time I think it kind of fetishizes that as the like sole ideal of like translation, when obviously things are being translated into various different languages all the time. And yeah, like I said, lots of people are always reading books in translation. I obviously also come at this from the perspective of someone who can only read one language, even if I would, well, I suppose technically I can slightly read one more, kind of, but like certainly not to a coherent degree, so really more one language, and I would like that to change. So the book that I spoke about in my video of the translated women books on my TBR was this, Siblings by Brigitte Reimann, translated by Lucy Jones, which is a book about East Germany written by an East German author. Yeah, it's fantastic. I won't go into it because like I said, I talked about it in that video. I think I also talked about the Natalia Ginzburg I would recommend in that video, which was Family Lexicon, and this is an edition translated by Jenny McPhee, which is a kind of autobiography, but it's also sort of a novel. It's like, I think it, to be honest, for me, I like it better as a novel. And there's certainly a sense of like the absence of Natalia Ginzburg in this because she's telling a story more about her family, which makes it more novelistic, I feel, than like an autobiography, but you know, that's whatever, neither here nor there. I just think it does count if you want to read fiction, even if it also potentially counts if you don't want to read fiction. And it's about like her family growing up in Turin. Yeah, her family has lots of kind of interesting ways of speaking and storytelling, and so it has like a focus on that, but obviously through that you get like a sense and an understanding of like what Natalia Ginzburg's life was like in her family. It's also really interesting from the perspective of history because it's about this family of like anti-fascists, and Natalia Ginzburg's father was Jewish, and it's during the 20th century, the like when was she born? Like 1910s or something. So it, you know, is following through the 1930s. On the back it's very sweet because it says the Levis are, among other things, unshakable anti-fascists. We support that. The other Natalia Ginzburg that I also talked about was Voices in the Evening, which I think is also a really interesting book about what happens after conflict. It's quite a short novel. I actually think there is like an audiobook of it, which is uncommon. If I remember correctly, it focuses on a kind of love affair or like a thwarted love affair between these two particular people in like one particular village, and it is focused post-war, I think, but only just. From my recollection, I did read this like last year, but I also feel like because I read so much Natalia Ginzburg last year, and they have similar kind of vibes in lots of ways and settings and things, and preoccupations too, like it's some of them like merged together, which I don't think is an indictment of her like literary work. It's just what happens when you read like an author quite consistently all in one go. A book I don't have here is Sweet Days of Discipline by Fleur Jaeggy, which I think is translated by Tim Parks, but I don't remember. I think it was translated from the Italian, but it's a Swiss novel, and it's about a girl who goes to a boarding school, and it's a quite like cruel and sort of a cruel and like interior look at a girl's coming of age, I guess, in a way. I think there's something quite sharp and difficult about it, but I also thought it was really well done. And yeah, like I said, me and my brain fog are not on the same, or I guess my brain fog is winning, which is why I can't remember anything about the things I'm talking about, but these are all recommendations, and hopefully you'll find things in them that are interesting to you. But you can also just read the blurbs and things, I guess, if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense. Another book that I would recommend is Money, by Victoria Benedictson, translated by Sarah Death from Swedish, which is also about like the coming of age of a girl, I guess, but in a different way. It's also done in kind of like chapter vignettes in a way, and it focuses on this young girl who gets married and her coming to understand her position as a woman in the kind of like marriage economy, and thinking about the economic construction of the social relations people have and their specifically gendered dynamic. And yeah, it's a really interesting book. It's from the 1880s, 1885, so I also think as a classic it's really interesting, and yeah, as a kind of an exploration of the difficulty of marriage and the impossibility of being a woman in patriarchy, capitalist patriarchy, I guess. Not that that is how it's described in this, but this is a book kind of about that. This is compared with Madame Bovary and A Doll's House by Ibsen, but I think it's nice that this is by a woman who had her own experience of what she's writing about and was more implicated in discussions of it and attempts to gain freedom for women than men who construct those stories as well. And also I think about like Anna Karenina in comparison with this. Obviously the vibe is different, like I don't think these are the same works, but I do just think like this should also be talked about because it's an interesting novel and it offers more real insight into like womanhood in a way that those other novels I don't think do. And I think they can tend to like fetishize the like depressive, suicidal woman. I would also really recommend Diary of a Lonely Girl by Miriam Karpilov, and also translated by Jessica Karzane. Yeah, I don't have my copy of it here, I don't think, but it's a quite like sparse and pessimistic novel, almost like hetero-pessimistic really, from the 1910s, I think 1916, 1918. It was originally serialized, I believe. It follows the diary of this girl who is living in New York, and it's basically about her like romantic connections with people, specifically one man who's called A, but also other men who are also given letters of the alphabet, and obviously there is like something to be said there about their like interchangeability, their lack of like their lack of difference, they're just letters. But yeah, it's one of those books where it's not explaining much, and you glean a lot from what is not described, or from the dialogue where something is like said that indicates that something else has happened, if that makes sense. Yeah, it is quite a like depressing book, but I still would recommend it. Another book I wanted to recommend is Will and Testament by Vigdis Hjorth, translated by Charlotte Barsland. This is probably, of all the books I've talked about, probably my favourite, even if it's also the most difficult, I think. It's about family conflict, but in the context of sexual abuse, and it also kind of starts from this place of thinking about cabins and homes and inheritances. The blurb has like, you know, one of those lines to catch what it's about, and it says 4 siblings, full stop, 2 summer houses, full stop, 1 terrible secret. But yes, it's an incredible portrait of families, and I mean, it is like pretty difficult, I think, in some ways to read. So obviously if stuff about child sexual abuse will trigger you, specifically incestuous child sexual abuse, like, I would obviously caution you. I also think if you're looking for ways to feel seen, it's one of those amazing books. And yeah, really, I would like to reread it one day, but maybe never I will. I don't know. I also think it's a really amazing book about sibling relationships. I guess maybe I would say that because of my own experiences, but both the like difficulty with siblings, but then also the like care and solidarity that especially one sibling has with the main character is really beautiful to me. So I guess we're in like a Scandinavian section. But so I've got Tove Jansson. This is the summer book, translated by Thomas Teal, but I also would recommend Fair Play, which I also think is translated by Thomas Teal. This is a really lovely book about basically the relationship between a grandchild and her grandmother when she's like visiting her on this island during the summer. Sophia, 6-year-old girl awakening to existence, and Sophia's grandmother nearing the end of hers. It's just a really beautiful book. It's another one I've really wanted to reread. It's just also one of those books I feel like I want to have time and space for, and I like never really do because of the way that it represents time and space. But maybe I will reread it one day. And Fair Play is also about a relationship, but not a familial one, more a kind of romantic and working relationship. I thought it was a really beautiful book about love, art, and growing old too. It's about these two artists who work together and live together on an island. It's not like super explicit that they're like gay and in love, but they are obviously gay and in love. And it's obviously also based on Tove Jansson's like own experience. And it was just really fantastic when I read it, so I would really recommend it. I think the last one is a sort of novel in poetry kind of thing, like a kind of hybrid form. It is called a novel on the cover, so I think it counts, with this nice shiny cover. So this is Deep Wheel Orcadia by Harry Josephine Giles. So this is written in the Orkney dialect, and the way that they do it is the poem is here, and then this is like a non-poetic, or like as in a verse translation of, like into English, of the poem. And it's also smaller, and I mean, like, I think some decisions were made to try to specifically continue to like marginalize English as opposed to making it like the big language again. And yeah, it's this really lovely novel poetry collection about home, relationships, islandness, space in lots of ways. Yeah, to some degree like transless artists. I did read this a few years ago now, and I don't remember it super specifically, but I do think it's lovely, and everybody I've recommended it to I think has really enjoyed it also. So if it sounds interesting to you, I'd really recommend checking it out. And Harry Josephine Giles is like really incredible and is writing some amazing things. So I would also just recommend her and her work. Okay, hopefully that wasn't too painless. Nope, hopefully that wasn't too painful. Let me know if you're interested in any of these books, or if you have any recommendations based off of them, or if you're planning to participate in Women in Translation Month, depending on when I get this video out. I hope you're having a lovely day when you're watching this, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!